Been online since we've been founded. We've been trying to figure out how to use technology to provide value to clients using not necessarily bleeding edge, but kind of leading technologies to provide business value. And Chuck pointed out he's there 39 and a half years. I've only been at online for about 33, 34 years. I focus more on the technical side of stuff. So going back in time, I've done a lot of different types of deterministic development using traditional development tool sets, using DBase. Anybody know DBase in the room? Yeah, not as many as I thought. And a whole bunch of other developmental platforms throughout all the years, making its way through client-server technologies, through to the web, through to integration technologies, through to all sorts of web technologies. And each one of those things people would say is an amazing jump. And boy, can we adapt to this change. But it's not just hype with AI, as people who use ChatGPT know. This is when I first, in the innovation lab, which on a previous slide was on the lower right, we've been looking at machine learning with AI and other leading technologies for a number of years now, but probably when we were OpenAI subscriber, and when we first saw it, I think it was either 2 or 3 when it first came out, then it was hard to explain, but the light bulbs went on real quick when you saw what it could do, that this was a significant jump. And we really quickly moved to focus on that in our innovation lab because of the amazing things that it promised. And boy, has it been a ride. You know, I don't typically do this, but if you were to think back on the prior 2 weeks in each one of your jobs and think about your teams working for you and try and think about the tasks that they were doing, which involved some element of summarization or information manipulation or memo writing or data analysis at a light level. If you think about all the work that maybe your folks would be thinking, got to do it, but it's kind of manual. And maybe I'm not adding value, but I got to do it. And imagine, so this is a thought experiment. Imagine if you could reduce that by about 50%, if you could reduce that. For the people in the room who are using ChatGPT, they understand that equation for their personal use, right, within their personal use. Some of you will understand it within systematizing it and actually putting it into your workflows. But it is amazingly powerful. I'll talk a bit about the hype, because that's always good. Talk about what challenges we see from our organizations that we work with, what kind of value it can bring, what's some case studies, which is what most people want to hear about, who's actually using this in the field, in production, which is what drives us at Online to a large extent. How can you get things into production, delivering value? And then wrap it up. I will caution, I have a habit of going long, but I actually got my phone here, so I'm going to try and stay within the time frames that I've been accorded. Gartner, who always has to be mentioned in any presentation like this, estimates that 85% of customer service leaders are gearing up to explore or pilot conversational generative AI solutions by 2025. And that is actually a rapid rise versus prior years from Gartner. They as an analyst organization, it's kind of hard to keep up with the level of change. The change not just within the industry itself, but change within the capabilities of the tooling that they're evaluating and that their clients evaluate. How many people have been shocked when they've gone from one model to the next, if you're using ChatGPT and you switch to, let's say, O3 Pro or something like that? It is shocking. It really is. These aren't, from the old software terms, these aren't 1.1 version changes. These are massive step changes in capability. And we're all preparing ourselves to sort of see. I can see how it's working for me personally. I can do my job really well. But you're trying to imagine, how do I work this into my own workflows, and what is reasonable to work into your own workflows from a capabilities point of view. In other words, it can do it now. And from a security point of view, which is always the a major concern, as it should be. For the hype cycle, it would show model ops, and I'm trying to look at generative AI going down, Gen AI enabled virtual assistants heading into, for those who know, the trough of disillusionment. Everybody know the trough of disillusionment, right? Before eventually rising to the plateau of productivity. Now it has been moving, all of these generative AI technologies are moving through at incredible rates, probably faster than any other technology that they have been having to analyze and provide to their clients. I don't kind of envy them having to ride this horse and analyze it. But what brings you to the trough of disillusionment? Well, a bunch of things are, people have tried some pilot projects. They tried to do some stuff with generative AI, and maybe they didn't get value. Maybe the value wasn't defined up front as to what value you were actually going to get. Maybe you overestimated what the capability of the generative AI approach you were taking was going to be able to deliver. The ROI is unclear. So about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the advisements were all around explore. Try and explore this technology. See what you can actually do with it. And that was great. Some people got some wins. But we're now at the point where it's not as much about exploration. You're still going to be doing that because this is changing quickly and the capabilities are changing quickly. But the questions now are about return on investment. If I'm making something with generative AI or deploying something with generative AI, what money am I saving in productivity or earning in revenue? The questions are less about exploration and where are you in that journey, and more about where's the ROI. And it is a daunting challenge in many ways. Where you use generative AI personally, you see what it can do for you personally, and you're trying to imagine, how can I take what I've just done personally and ask this thing to do for me? How can I take that and work it actually to within the systems I am making, deploying, and servicing my customers and my employees with? Right? That is the thought that goes through your mind. So what are the different use cases, let's say that way? Right? But before you can even get to doing the use cases, you have to be setting as an entity, what are your foundational elements? It's fun to use ChatGPT to solve some of your problems, but I did ask unfairly who is using ChatGPT. But I'll ask one other question. Maybe close your eyes so you don't see what your neighbors say. How many of you actually formally defined within your organization what are acceptable use policies for using generative AI? Yeah, you know what? Pretty good coverage there, actually. Better than I would have thought, right? The thing about setting foundational aspects such as how can I have acceptable use? How can I use this tooling? What is the governance for my entity? What is accepted or not accepted for my business? Right? You can view it as a constrainer, and rogue people like me would probably feel, oh, don't constrain me, don't tell me what to do, because that's my natural disposition. But for an entity, it frees people up. When you put up the fences as to what can or cannot be done, people will then feel safe in using it in the way that you've asked them. And so the use of it will expand. Once you have your governance and your ethics and the frameworks established, and you understand not only how you're going to use it personally within your company, but for your business, you can then transition into embedding Gen AI into the workflows and the business value that you're actually looking to get out of it. So, are we at the plateau of productivity? There are some, but not many. Not very many at all, which is not surprising. Not surprising, and I'll go back to use cases again. We struggle with doing use cases, which I'll talk about more in a little bit. But hey, we're talking about hype here, so let's talk about headlines. We're all seeing these type of stories about major players, let's say decreasing, you might see it first in the developmental aspect. We're cutting this many developers, like from a huge company, because we're using generative AI to do development. We're all in, as Shopify CEO is saying, doesn't matter what your job is at Shopify, you are looking to generative AI to solve the problem for you, whether you're dev, whether you're something else. And their adoption is something that we're all going to be going through over the next number of years, not just on the capabilities that they're offering in terms of constantly evaluating what options they have, but in terms of how do we actually work in a similar manner. How many people think that you wouldn't use AI for doing some of your day-to-day jobs because it's unreliable? Well, there should be more hands up than that. It's reliable if you double check it. Every version release is getting more and more reliable. As you double check it, you see that it is more accurate. So we all know, especially if you're using it from the early days, that in some ways it is unreliable, but we still get value out of it. Right? And then as time goes on, it becomes more and more reliable, and so you use it more. And then as time goes on, you start to decrease the hallucinations, and you start to understand how to talk to it, and the models themselves improve in their response, and that is where we're actually going to be. 80%, this is the classic one, 80% of companies' data is unstructured. It's the emails, it's the memos, process documents, other documents of that nature floating throughout your entire organization. And some of it is totally unstructured, but most of it is just kinda unstructured. There is a form to it, but we haven't been able to access it. In the early days at Online, we were trying to figure out how to use natural language processing tools, which we still do, like NTLK or Spacey, some of those things to extract information, but they weren't quite accurate enough, and it definitely wasn't put into the hands of an end user. But with the rise of the full models right now in terms of what they can do, the things that they can do for extracting true information, extracting from the unstructured information and placing it into structured form for use within your organizations to help you automate customer support or automate other processes, which I'll be talking about. The powers are there now. I will say it. The power is there. But it still means that you got to get to good, clean data. Just because you can upload a document to ChatGPT and say, extract the customer names out of this document, straightforward. Everybody, or most people, have got lots of documents, right? And what is the gold standard for this unstructured data? You still need to get unstructured data moving towards a gold standard in terms of curation, so that you don't have 50 versions of a benefits plan. You've got a gold standard version of a benefits plan against which you can work. Things of that nature. So there's still work, lots of work to be done. You can use generative AI to aid you in creating that gold curated standard. The workflows and the processes, summarization, information extraction, those tools are there, but you still have to go through the expense of doing it. And I would argue that there is some, within almost every organization, there are gold standard pieces of information, if you look for it. In the HR function, as I said before, if you've got a benefit and a policies program, if you look at it, it's being used by all of your people and your customers in some cases to answer questions about what benefits they have. They are produced, they're provided, and for the most part, they answer 95% of the questions that may arise. So in many places, that's just one example, you have some gold standard unstructured information. And we can use generative AI to continue to create and extract from your current unstructured information good things. So what holds companies back? For the most part, it's we don't know where to start because the darn thing does so much. We don't quite know where we're going to get a value out of it. And you know what, maybe we don't know how to do good data integration with it. And we don't trust it, because it hallucinates. How many people have heard the word hallucinate when it comes to generative AI? Yeah, ready. How many people think that hallucinate is a bad word? It is a bad word in general, right? You know, I don't want to hallucinate. You know, if I'm telling a story where I hallucinated, that's typically not a good story I'm telling, right? If you think about it that way, right? Right. But that level of hallucination is a plus and a minus. The hallucination ability of a large language model is actually part of its creativity. You can use the hallucination levels, and you can dial it in. You can make it more creative. If you dial it down to 0, I'm not going to say it won't ever hallucinate, but it might not. In many cases, hallucination is good. It opens up avenues of creation. But the adoption of generative AI, one of the things is change is hard. Change is hard for everybody. 34%, this comes from our organizational change management practice and background work that we've done. 34% of change initiatives were considered clear successes, while 50% stalled or failed. That comes from Gartner. And that's because change is hard. And that's the level, so in many ways, this isn't just about generative AI. I'm not talking about generative AI change here. I'm talking about just change. Bringing in new systems, digital transformation. Trying to teach people to do things differently, right? That is a hard thing. And not most, but many times you find leaders don't necessarily agree on a change, and that can impact how successful it's actually going to be. And this is what do you call it? This is the money quote from a company. A survey of over 700 senior decision makers found that 68% of C-suite leaders perceive transformation projects as high risk, which is good on them, because it is. It is high risk, right? But the interesting one is, notably, 38% of them would sooner resign than lead a large-scale transformation. Okay, so again, this is not about, I'm not talking generative AI. I'm just talking change. Generative AI, as regards to a change, is massive. It is just, in terms of capabilities increasing and the rate of increase and what its capabilities are, it is incredible what it is enabling you to do. Faster than anything before. So if we thought a lot of digital transformation is difficult, hey, we've got to get a mobile strategy, and then we've got to roll out a mobile application, and then now we're going to be mobile first. I'm just using examples here. That is a high change level. We met it. But I'm not going to say for a lot of places that it was very straightforward, right? It's very nervous-making. But Gen AI drives that change even harder. So what are the big challenges that we see when we talk to clients? Number one for me is lack of clear use cases, right? We can all come up with general use cases, but good, clear use cases associated directly to my company, me, what we do, the value that we provide. Those use cases are really, really wide. There are a lot of them. What do we start with? And not only what do we start with, what is capable of being done? So it's a couple of things. Is it doable? Is it safe? Does it add value? Can I control it? Those are all really important things before you actually start engaging. So that upfront planning side, as much as you can plan for the rate of change, you have to go through and figure out what use cases do we really need to take a look at, and I'll have some qualifications on that in a couple of slides. How hard is it to integrate? It's getting better. A lot of the integrations that we've been doing internally for our frameworks, we've had to hand roll the integrations into the generative AI applications that we made. But it's getting much better with things like Model Context Protocol. There are a variety of industry standards arising out there to try and make the integration much easier. But initially, it wasn't necessarily that straightforward. How do you do it? Cost and ROI uncertainty. So you have to have a good business case, and you actually have to be able to model what are the usage cases and against how much am I actually going to have to pay for the token counts for the models that I'm using, right? So a little bit of mystery in some cases, but you have to be able to model it or you're not sure you're going to get your actual value. Data and privacy and security concerns are onliners. We'll be talking about that in a few slides, but probably a very, very big one. People are rightfully concerned about unleashing something which looks a bit like an alien on answering some questions with data that we have. And are we doing it right? Can you do generative AI in a manner where you're going to get slapped on the hand from a governance point of view and a compliance point of view? Yeah, absolutely. You can do it. If you don't adequately train, let's say, a conversational user experience in terms of giving a guidance in terms of what it can say or can't say, right? If you're not constantly not only providing those guidelines, but then ongoing monitoring those guidelines, like is it still operating within acceptable operating parameters? All of those things still apply, or you will end up in a bad world. How many people have heard that Air Canada story about their chatbot made kind of a financial commitment on ticket refund that it shouldn't have done? It shouldn't have done that. And then they're forced to pay, basically, right? Because guess what? It's operating on your behalf. It's a system that you put out, and it's operating on your behalf. Well, you have to think that. You have to really think that way and understand what sort of guardrails you're actually putting in place, which is doable and much, much better now than it was 2 years ago. The guardrail question, the safety question, much, much more straightforward. And then model output and reliability issues, which they're improving with every release. Man, if it just stopped now, it's a quote from a guy named Ethan Mollick, and he made the quote last year. He said, if it just stopped, if everything, for whatever reason, if GPT-4 just stopped at GPT-4 and everybody else said we're not doing anything, and it just stayed right there, you'd be looking at 5 or 10 years to fully explore just the capabilities of that model. What could you do with it? So it's improving rapidly. But there are lots of opportunities for generative AI. We use it, you'll see, for content creation extensively. I won't say it was used in the creation of this presentation. This is all done by hand. Typing into ChatGPT and a bunch of other things. But anyways, content creation, it's fantastic. Really good, our data science group. Really good at helping out with data analysis. We'll hear good stories about customer and internal support, and getting much better with agentic on process automation. So it is making its way through in terms of what value it can actually provide to you right now. And why are these things kind of good? From any company's point of view, there's a low risk of harm with a lot of this, right? If you're doing content creation, as long as you are monitoring what content you're putting out there, there's a low risk of harm, and you can gain a lot of advantages. There are controlled outputs in each one of these processes. You have a human oversight aspect on the system you've created that would actually be able to tell this thing's wrong, like it's going snake. It's wrong. You got a good human in the loop feedback, and there's good measurable ROI on it. So when we approach trying to explore with our clients, where would generative AI kind of fit for them? We take a look at what use cases they have. We focus on a start small. We ensure that there is oversight across the board. Train the teams and measure and scale. These are all steps along the path. The identify use cases is getting much, much better. So I'm now talking online, we use generative AI to help us in use case generation, right? Depending upon the industry, depending upon what use cases may be considered. And we then, of course, store those things to use in future engagements. So actually finding out what's a good use case, what's doable, we've got that. Starting small is more my advice so you can gain success. Make sure humans are in the loop. And follow through on measurement and scaling so that you can actually say at the end of the implementation, we said we would do this and we did, and we got this value and that's good, right? So it's not just about exploration. From a value readiness point of view, you still need to look internally when you're evaluating use cases to see, hey, how mature is my data? What gold data do I actually have? Are my use cases that I want to do clear? Are we actually ready for the change? Right? We can come up with some really good ideas, but parts of your places, your companies, may not be ready for that change. And your customers, especially when you start thinking about that, they may not be ready. Does it fit with our current business processes? Because if it doesn't, it will be resisted largely. Do we actually have the technology to get it done? Do we know enough about the technology to actually get it done? And are we applying our governance and risk principles to ensure that we're defining that value correctly and that we will get something good? So one of the things we use is an idea. It's not the magic quadrant. It's a quadrant system, but it's not the magic quadrant. It's just a kind of the idea of a value spectrum. On the left-hand side, how ready is your organization for a use case that you're evaluating, right? And that's from an organizational, people point of view, and structure point of view, and a technical point of view. And across the bottom, what kind of business value return do we think we're going to get? So, like the magic quadrant, you want to be in the upper right, right? So it's got that similarity. But quick wins would be very easy to do, and we're kind of ready for it. And we actually get a return that's measurable. And you can evaluate the others. Strategic bet, you might make that down the line. You might say, this is something that's actually we're not quite ready for, and it's going to be hard to do. But we're going to start investing in that thing because it's a bigger bet, and we're going to get a really, really high value. So, and it's strategic to the company. Of course, you avoid the lower left. It's almost every quadrant you see, you avoid the lower left, isn't it? I feel bad for the lower left, right? Nobody wants to look at the lower left. Avoid it. So in this case, if you're to map out that value spectrum, balancing effort of readiness and return and capability, the example I use here is an internal HR policy chatbot. From the point of view of organizational and technical readiness, all employees are kind of ready to have their questions answered quicker than they were before. Your HR staff is ready to have something else answer those questions because they're pretty much predefined within benefits and other documents that you've got. So you've got data readiness too. It is not super complicated. It is quite achievable. And it kind of rides the line. You're not making money out of it. It's more about productivity improvement and maybe employee satisfaction. So it fits there nice. I'm not going to talk about software development too much because then I'd be crazy over. But you could make, this is more my feel on the software development side. There is huge value in the software development aspect in terms of speed, quality, and readiness. I'd be happy to talk to people about that outside of this, but I love that. Because for software development, you can basically get an improvement over almost any one of these key activities. And I've even got one in here, if you take a look at limitations, effective for docs and code navigation, but weak for advanced troubleshooting. That's disappearing super fast. Like just that limitation is disappearing. It's getting much, much better. So I'm not going to dive into this slide because I want to spend more time on, I'm going to do this really quick. I'm going to try and explain one thing about generative AI development versus deterministic development. So in the upper left-hand corner, I'm going to hit this thing. Is it going to work? Holy moly, audio too. So you bought a pirate Lego ship model from someplace, and you brought it home, and it's got directions, and you're building a pirate Lego ship, and it looks like a pirate Lego ship. If you take it apart, put it back in the box, and hand it to another person, they will make the pirate Lego ship. It'll look like it. It'll be it. But, okay, where's my hand? If you go to a person who's used to building Lego models and has tons of pieces, and there are a lot of them, and you say, I want you to build me a pirate Lego ship, they will build you a pirate Lego ship. And it'll look like a pirate Lego ship. But it will not look like the box, pirate Lego ship. Yeah, let's speed it up. Hold on. Where'd my picture go? I'm belaboring a point. Because the next time you ask the same AI, build me a pirate Lego ship, all of a sudden, it doesn't look like the other one. Right? It's got more sails, it's higher, it's got different, like, it's not the same twice. So what I'm trying to say is, if you give a painting to the person building the pirate Lego ship, that can operate as a guideline for that builder to build a pirate Lego ship which looks like that. So that's what I'm trying to explain, determinism versus just, and I'm so greedy or whatever, I just had to do it. I created these videos in altogether 4 minutes with like 4 sentences, right? So that's generative AI at work, actually. So case studies, people like to hear case studies, as do I. I love them. That's where it kind of comes together. We have a client in Portland, Oregon called Northwest Natural. In this case, it's Northwest Natural Water. There's a Northwest Natural Gas. And they're a water utility in the US, not just in Oregon. They're buying water utilities kind of across the United States. And every time they buy a water utility, they get another 100, 150 employees. And so for them, the answering the questions about benefits, policies, what do you actually have when you're intaking an entire company, it was I'll call it a royal pain. It was a royal pain for the customer service reps who had to answer these questions, because not only that, they're dealing in some cases with many documents representing many originating companies, which are slowly then being turned into the amalgamated. Right. So you can imagine there's a whole bunch of gold curated standard documents here representing those benefits and the policies that each one of those people get. And it's like a perfect type of generative AI type solution. It can, if you've got gold curated unstructured data in PDFs or docs or whatever else, it is really good at, with the right people, at extracting the information from that, generating the questions that might be asked of that content, whoops, and deploying it. So their estimate, in their case, was they think maybe it saved them $797,000. I didn't validate that. That's from them. I think it saved them a lot of money. Maybe not that. But it's for them, as an acquirer, and their forward plans are acquiring, it was a major pain point. This was done extremely quickly, pushed out as a pilot, no, not even a pilot, just a proof of concept, done in a few weeks as a proof of concept. And then they just turned it out. They just kind of released it without our knowledge to all of the people. Because the HR folks said, look, just get this thing out there, right? We don't want to answer these questions anymore. So they just turned it out. And then since then we've done, this is all in this case, it's Microsoft Copilot coupled with some scripting, coupled with some fine tuning, but a pretty standard business architecture. And done with a little bit of tweaks, done very, very well. And well received. We've done another one, I think we're working on our 3rd or 4th, but one on more like rate inquiries. So now they're kind of turning it to customers phoning in with questions about their water rates, about their actual bill. So, but it's a nice step. Get this done, demonstrate value, confidence, move on to the next with a Microsoft architecture in this case. For Manitoba Real Estate Association, with members in the room, This is a very nice, and our CE folks will be talking about examples like this before. It is a nice example of, for a contact center, handling the transcripts, automated transcription of customer calls. And what you have to typically do when a customer phones in with an issue, or it doesn't matter what side of the issue it is, whether it's legal or whether it's broker or whether it's, you know, a buyer, you have to have the call, take your notes, summarize the notes, extract the information, categorize the call itself as to what area of problem people are having with regulations, and then put up dashboard reporting. And in this case, I won't have done, some of the folks are here in the room, I won't have done nearly enough service to that, but I'll leave it at that. But the value you get from that is your folks on those calls, they're focused on doing their job, and a lot of the, I won't call it, a lot of the manual work is removed, and they can keep on working on the value add stuff. This again is another combination of Microsoft architectures within it, along with some other stuff. So thank you, Manitoba Real Estate Association. Now I'm going to walk through this slide in detail. I will not. This is just an example of, this is our use at online business systems. We've got a risk, security, and privacy practice. Some of the folks are in this room right now, including the leader. That is a process which basically means that you're evaluating people's, I'll call them security documents, security policies, and many transcriptions of interviews that you carry out with a client. And you're trying to make a determination as to where they stand within some regulatory compliance part. And generative AI is really good at this sort of stuff, at helping. I'm not saying it's not doing the full assessment. It's helping the assessor extract from the hundreds to 200s of pages of document information to pull together the information required to actually, at the end of the day, human in the loop, making the assessment themselves. So if you've got within your companies lots of policies, or if you're doing a lot of regulatory compliance, if you're doing a lot of questions like that where you got to assess it, it's very strong. This, and again, is a Microsoft solution. That's a Copilot. Yeah. Now, I won't go too much into this one. It's kind of out there. So if you can imagine creating an application where if you're a physician, you could prescribe it to a patient who might be having mental health issues. And they would be able to interact with this application and ask them a bunch of questions in an intelligent fashion and empathetic fashion, and keep on asking questions until you can actually arrive at something which is like a pre-diagnosis of mental health issues. This is a huge issue within the Canadian or any health industry in North America. And having emergency room physicians and others don't have the full time to be able to ask all those questions or even understand all those questions. But a tool like that would be quite useful. But it would have to be able to have good conversations in multiple languages. It would have to be able to be deterministic because it's actually doing assessments, it's actually doing hard numbers. And boy, would you have to watch what it said. You would have to make sure that it was not saying bad stuff. And that is what we built here. This is Neoptio. And to build this system, we need to create a conversational platform which would enable it. And that's this platform that we call it MindTXN. It enables you to do that in a secure way, and you can create what I would call non-straightforward chatbots, nuanced conversations which are complicated, and where history is required, and guardrails are required. We can do that, and we can do it really quickly. And it's this weird hybrid, as I said before, about the AI and determinism. It walks the line, you dial it in, how, to use the AI term, stochastic, which is what the large language models are, probabilistic, stochastic. How do you walk the line between conversation which is probabilistic and deterministic? So that's the framework, and that's what we created with the MindTXN platform. So whatever complicated, if you got a nuanced discussion, that is all doable now too. So, you know, I think we all understand this, that AI is not just a tool on the table. It's a coworker. I find myself, I use basically almost every one. Like I'm using Google, I'm using ChatGPT, I'm using Grok. There aren't that many who are using that. I'm using Perplexity. I'm not using any one of them for all of it. I'm using some of it for each problem I do. And it is my little coworker. And the reason I can do that is because we have an acceptable use policy. I understand where the frameworks are. I understand where the lines are between how I can or cannot use it. And it's important as a company that we use it. And that's one of our people in the company said that we should really use it. And that was me. So I listened to them. So I'm probably going, yes, I'm a minute too long. I usually do. But if you've got any questions, I'm open to questions. I think I got just a few minutes.